There was no shyness on the part of Michael. The familiar appellation he had used was not assumed for the purposes of proving his obedience, but resulted from a genuine feeling of affectionate confidence in every word she had uttered, and which had left on his mind the belief that she was not only his generous patroness, but his loving friend. "I little thought when I was talking to you this morning about my poor self," he said, "that I should so soon have to take you away again from your drawing, to talk about Edward." "About Edward?" said Mary, colouring. "What do you wish to say about him, dear Michael?" "It is something that he declares he would die rather than to say to you himself," replied Michael. "But I am certain that you ought to know it, for it is quite clear that there is no chance of happiness for him unless you agree to his wishes." "What wishes?" exclaimed the heiress, terribly agitated. "For goodness' sake, Michael, do not trifle with me. Did Edward commission you to speak to me?" "Oh, no. Had he felt the courage to do that, I should have told him at once that he had better do it himself," replied Michael. "Indeed, I fear greatly that he will be displeased with me, but I cannot bear to see him so miserable without mentioning it to the only person capable of helping him." "Miserable? Helping him? Tell me, Michael, tell me at once what you mean." "That is exactly what I wish to do, dear Mary," replied Michael, looking with considerable surprise at her varying color and agitated features. "But I fear I am doing wrong, and that I have already said something that vexes you." "Oh, no!" cried Mary impatiently. "Only go on." "In one word, then," resumed Michael, "our dear Edward wishes beyond all things to enter the Austrian service." "And leave us?" returned the heiress, almost gasping. "Does Edward want to leave me?" "Do not suspect him of ingratitude, Mary," cried Michael eagerly. "There is a reason for it, and without this I am quite sure he would never think of such a thing. Edward has conceived an unfortunate passion for an object from whom he ought to fly, and this, of course, will explain everything to you." "Let me see him! Let me hear him! From himself, and from himself only, can I hear this, let it mean what it may." On uttering these words, which were spoken with a very agitated and untranquil air, Mary Brotherton rushed out of the room, much to Michael's astonishment, for he could by no means comprehend why she should testify such very strong emotions, especially as he had so cautiously and delicately avoided hinting at anything about a married woman being the unhappy object of his brother's passion. In this ignorance of Michael's, the reader, I am very sorry to say, must share. There are some facts which no wise historian will ever venture to dilate upon, lest their strangeness should provoke incredulity, and great wisdom is shown by such forbearance, for it is infinitely better that an enlightened public should be driven to exclaim, "How very obscure this passage is!" than "How very improbable!" Mchl Armstrong is the hero of the book that is now drawing rapidly to its conclusion, and every reader has therefore a right to expect that his destiny shall be plainly announced to them, whatever mystery may hang over that of others. Whatever occurred between the heiress and Edward, in the conference which they held speedily together, it did not cause any alteration in that lady's purpose of immediately returning to her chateau upon the Rhine. A man of worth and great ability was engaged to take charge of the richly teeming, eager mind of Michael during the 2 years that it was settled he should remain at a German university, and nothing could be more satisfactory than the result of this arrangement. Never, perhaps, were 2 years put to greater profit in the development of mind than upon this occasion, and when they were ended, Mchl Armstrong was able to take his station upon the beautiful terrace without feeling that he was out of place there. Less than these 2 years had sufficed to bring to perfection all Mary Brotherton's plans for improving and beautifying her spacious residence. It was one of those subterranean quarries which are sometimes seen to spread themselves to such miraculous extent in that region, and would have inspired most ladies with a feeling of dreary vastness, which, notwithstanding the exceeding beauty of its position, would have prevented any hope of rendering it comfortably habitable. But Mary had an ample heart and an ample purse, circumstances over which, to use a thoroughly authorized expression, she had no control, for in truth they had preceded her birth, had rendered her own country less dear to her than it is to most others, and she therefore not only determined to plant herself elsewhere, but to do so in such a manner as would enable her to make her new abode her home in the best sense of the word, and this could only be done by giving, ample room and verge enough to make it the home of others also. Any traveler lucky enough to light upon this widely spreading, but comfortable and thoroughly well kept up abode, will find that, notwithstanding its great extent, it has by no means the air of being uninhabited. Nobody will be much surprised to hear that Michael Armstrong and Fanny Fletcher became man and wife, or that they proved a very loving and happy pair. But should any curious Rhenish tourist obtain an introduction to this Rhenish Ranguian paradise, they will probably observe two very loving and happy pairs, to whom it serves as a common, yet, in some sort, a separate home, each having its suite of drawing rooms, boudoirs, nurseries, schoolrooms, etc. But however much a gossiping inclination might lead a more explicit detail, there is really no room left to enter upon it. All that can be said in addition to this is, that when Sir Matthew Dowling's affairs came to be wound up, there was discovered to be a sufficient surplus to afford a small independence to each of his children, which, being divided according to the proportion dictated by the knight's will, gave something approaching to a Benjamin's mess portion to his daughter Martha. To claim and receive this, as well as occasionally to visit some members of her family, Martha made frequent excursions to England, but her happiest hours were those she passed with her dear friends in Germany, by whom she is ever received with open arms. Miss Tremlett is still enjoying an old age of perfect comfort, cheered by warm affection, and is already the darling of many little hearts. There is no record to be found in any documents relating to the inhabitants of the chateau, showing that Edward Armstrong ever entered the Austrian service. It is, therefore, most reasonable to suppose that this wish was never complied with. The end. And thus ends my reading of The Life and Adventure of Michael Armstrong, Factory Boy, by Francis Milton Trollope. More videos later.